There are two types of mothers in this world. Those who give birth from their own womb and those who, like me, take a child that no one wanted and transform it into their own blood. But sometimes, my daughter, love doesn't cure everything. And it was this same motherly love that one day almost killed me in my own bed. My name is Gertrudes Oliveira, but everyone here in Cachoeira do Sul knows me as Dona J, or the woman who adopted the boy from the orphanage. I'm 76 years old these days, my dear. And each of these wrinkles on my face tells a different story. Some of joy, others of pain, which not even time could erase. I still live in this old house, at the back of the São José neighborhood, with peeling walls, but still resisting the test of time. From my balcony I can see a piece of the Jacuí River, which cuts through the city like a blue vein. This river has seen everything in this life, the joys, the sadness, and also that day in 1992 that changed my family forever. It was when a woman believed that she could save any child with love, even those who carry wounds so deep that not even God can heal them. And you who are listening to me now, tell me what your name is and from which corner of Brazil you are listening to the story that has been kept in my heart for more than 30 years. Tell me below in the comments, okay? I'm curious to know how far my old country voice is reaching. Who knows, maybe there's even someone from Cachoeira do Sul who already knows me by sight and didn't even know about this secret I carry. Cachoeira do Sul is not a big city, my daughter. It's one of those places where time seems to pass more slowly. A region with lots of rice and soy plantations and where everyone knows everyone else. The main streets are wide, but when you enter the older neighborhoods like mine, they become narrow, with crooked sidewalks that make older people like me walk looking at the ground to avoid falling. You know, we're not in the best shape anymore, right, my dear? Here there is an old church, a central square where old people play dominoes, and the river that sometimes, when it rains a lot, floods the lower houses and takes a bit of the city with it. It was after that flood in 1988 that my late husband, Jose, and I decided it was time to expand our family. We already had our two biological children, Paulo, who was 17 at the time, and Margarita, who was 15. But I always had this soft heart, you know? I always wanted to have more children. It was Margarita who gave me the idea. She had gone to do a school project at the Santa Clara orphanage, on the other side of the city. He arrived home with his eyes red from crying so much. Mom, you needed to see those children. There are some that have been there for years and nobody wants them because they are too big. Everyone just wants to drink. That kept going around in my head. Jose, my husband, wasn't very emotional, no, but he always respected my wishes. He worked as a foreman at the rice cooperative. He was a serious man, of few words, but with a good heart. When I mentioned the idea of adopting an older child, he just looked at me with that look he had, smoking his straw cigarette on the porch, and said, "If that's what you want, Gag, let's go see this child." The first time we visited the orphanage, my heart almost jumped out of my mouth. It was a clean place, but so sad. Children are supposed to run, jump, make noise. It seemed like everyone there was afraid to even breathe too loudly. The director, Mrs. Clemencia, a thin lady with a face like someone who just sucked on a lemon, took us to her office. "Do you have a preference for a boy or a girl? How old?" "We want a child who really needs a family," I said, feeling a courage I didn't even know I had. "One that maybe others wouldn't want to adopt." That's when she mentioned Rodrigo for the first time. "I have a 9-year-old boy. He's been with us since he was 5. He's one of the oldest here, intelligent, but reserved. His mother was a drug user, she died of an overdose. No one knows who his father is." When I saw Rodrigo for the first time, he was sitting alone in the corner of the courtyard with an old book in his hand. A skinny boy, with straight black hair cut short, and big dark eyes that seemed to swallow the world. He didn't smile when they introduced us, he just looked, studying us as if we were a suspicious little animal. He doesn't talk much, explained Mrs. Clemencia, but he is intelligent, gets good grades at school, and just has difficulty relating to the other children. At that moment, my mother's heart had already decided. That boy needed a family, he needed me. Jose, who was beside me, shook my hand. He had felt something too. The adoption process was not easy. It never is. There was an interview, a visit from the social worker to our house, endless paperwork, but I was determined. In 4 months, Rodrigo was already at home with us, with a small backpack containing everything he had in the world. Some clothes, a storybook, and an old plastic car. At first he was so quiet that sometimes I forgot he was home. He stayed in the room he shared with Paulo, who didn't like it at all, but I said it was just until we could tidy up the back room. He barely spoke during meals, he ate looking at his plate, as if he was afraid someone would take his food away. Little by little, I tried to get closer. I made the dishes he liked. I discovered that I loved pasta with meat sauce. I bought books because I noticed that was what he liked to do most. Sat next to him in the living room while watching television. At first, he would cower when I got close, as if he expected something bad. It broke my heart to see that. The first time he smiled at me was when he had been with us for a month. I had made a chocolate cake to celebrate with just one old lady. The idea is kind of silly, but I wanted to set the date. 1 month of our Rodrigo in the family, I said. He looked at me with those big eyes, surprised, and a little smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. It was small, shy, but it was there. Jose, who was at the head of the table, also saw it and gave me a little wink. That night I thought everything was going to be okay, that we had made the right choice. Rodrigo started going to the neighborhood school. The first few months were difficult. He would come home with his notebooks torn up, sometimes with a black eye or a bruised knee. What happened? I would ask, my heart heavy. Nothing, he would always answer, his eyes downcast. It was the teacher, Dona Helena, who told me that the other boys teased him, calling him an orphan, nobody's son. Things that only cruel children can invent to hurt him. But he doesn't react, she told me worriedly. He stays quiet, swallows everything. This is not normal, Dona Gertrudes. Most children cry, fight, tell an adult. He seems to be oblivious. Over time, things started to change, but not in the way I expected. Rodrigo was still quiet at home, but at school his teacher started to complain about other problems. She said he would have outbursts of anger over small things, a broken pencil, a book he couldn't find. He would cry suddenly, for no apparent reason, or would stare into space for minutes on end. I tried to talk to him, but it was like talking to a wall. Jose, my husband, was starting to get impatient. He needs rules, G. You spoil the boy too much. But how can you not spoil him? I looked at that skinny little face, at those eyes that seemed to carry too much weight for a 9-year-old child. And all I could think about was how to make him feel loved, safe. Oh, my daughter, if you re-enjoying this story of overcoming, give the channel Memorias de Vovo a little boost, okay? Just click the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of our stories. This old grandma here is very happy to know that there are people who want to hear what I have to tell. Now let's continue, because this story still has a lot to tell. There are things we don't like to remember, but that need to be told so that other people don't go through the same thing. One day, when Rodrigo had been with us for almost a year, he came home from school later than usual. It was almost night and I was already worried about going out to look for it. When he came through the door, he had a nasty cut on his chin and his uniform shirt was torn. My God, boy, what happened? I asked, running to examine the wound. For the first time since he had arrived, he exploded. He threw his backpack on the floor with such force that the books scattered all over the room. They said that you only adopted me because you get money from the government. They said that no one would want an old boy like me, really? I was speechless for a few seconds, seeing that boy who was always so controlled, finally releasing the anger he was keeping inside. Then, without thinking twice, I hugged him tightly. At first, he was stiff as a board. Then, slowly, he relaxed until he started to cry. A cry so deep, so painful, that it seemed come from deep within my soul. "You are my son," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "My son of my heart. And there is no government money, there is love. You are an olive tree now and no one will take you away from us." That night felt like a turning point, like something inside him had cracked and allowed us to finally come in. He started talking more during dinner, talking about school, asking questions about his family. Jose also got closer, teaching him how to fix things around the house and how to fish in the river on the weekends. How wrong I was, my daughter, how blind can we be when we want to believe in something too much? Because what I didn't know was that this was just the beginning of a story that would become increasingly difficult and that would end on a night that would change our family forever. You know, my daughter, there is something I only learned when I was old. Sometimes our love is like a blindfold. It makes us ignore what is right in front of us, those signs that destiny sends, warning us that something wrong is happening under our own roof. When Rodrigo turned 11, he had already been with us for almost 2 years. It seemed like things were finally getting back on track. The boy had grown a few inches and had gained a bit of body. He was no longer that skinny child who arrived with the small backpack and scared eyes. At school, his grades were good, not excellent as in the beginning, but they remained average. Teachers no longer sent notes complaining about strange behavior. And he had even made 2 friends in the neighborhood, Toninho and Marcos, who sometimes came to play at our house. It was around this time that my Paulo, the eldest son, married Lourdes and moved to Porto Alegre. Margarita also left home to study nursing in the capital. Suddenly, it was just me, Jose and Rodrigo in that house that had seemed so cramped before and now felt too big. I wonder if that wasn't what messed with the boy's head, seeing his brothers hanging out, even though they had never been very close. Maybe you felt like you were going to be abandoned again. The first things I started to notice were small but strange. Objects in the house that disappeared and appeared in different places. A pair of scissors that used to be in the kitchen drawer ended up under his bed. A wall clock that disappeared for days and then returned to the same place. One time my silver rosary that I got from my late mother went missing for a whole week. I looked everywhere. I even prayed to Saint Anthony, patron saint of lost things. When I had already lost hope, I found him rolled up inside a sock at the bottom of Rodrigo's drawer. "Why did you take my rosary, son?" I asked, trying to show irritation. He looked at me in that empty way that sometimes gave me the creeps. "I didn't take anything. Someone must have put it there." Jose didn't have the same patience as me. "You can't lie, kid. If you did, you have to admit it. We don't raise children to be liars." That was the first time I saw him look at Jose with real anger. A hard look, too adult for an 11-year-old boy. Then he left, slamming the bedroom door and spending the rest of the day without speaking to us. I also started to notice that Rodrigo spent a lot of time alone. Jose bought him a video game for his 12th birthday. He saved up for months to get this present, but instead of playing the normal games that boys his age played, he spent hours locked in his room playing games that I didn't even really understand. One time I came in unexpectedly to bring him a snack and the game he was playing seemed too violent. There was blood on the screen, horrible things. He closed everything as soon as he saw me. "What game is this, Rodrigo?" I asked, putting the plate with cake on the table. "Nothing, Mom, it's just an adventure game." I told Jose about it, but he said I was exaggerating. What boy of that age really likes these action-packed, fighting things? You protect the boy too much, Gig. He has to learn to be a man. Sometimes, Rodrigo took longer than usual to come home from school. He said he had stayed in the library studying or that he had gone to a friend's house. I believed her for a long time. Until the day the school coordinator called my house asking where Rodrigo had been. He had been absent for 3 days in a row. What do you mean, absent? He goes out every day in uniform with his backpack on his back. I answered, feeling my blood run cold in my veins. Mrs. Gertrudes, your son hasn't been here for 3 days. I thought he was sick. When he came home that day, at the usual time, as if he had come from school, I confronted him first. He denied it, said the school had made a mistake. When I showed him the note from the coordinator, he changed his story. He had indeed gone to school, but some boys were making fun of him. So he decided to skip school. Why didn't I? Did you tell me, son? I could have helped you, talked to the principal, why wouldn't you understand? He yelled in a way he had never done before. Do you think everyone is as nice as you, that everyone wants to help? That's not how the world works. Jose, who was coming home from work at that time, heard the yelling and came to see what was going on. When I explained, he turned red with rage. It was the first time I saw my husband raise his hand to hit Rodrigo, but I got in the way. No, Jose, hitting won't solve anything. This boy needs limits, Gertrudes. Can't you see what's happening? He's lying to us, skipping school. God knows what else he's doing out there. Rodrigo took advantage of our argument and ran away, slamming the front door hard. He only came back at dawn, when we had already called the police. He came in without making a sound, but I was awake in the living room waiting. When I turned on the light, I got a fright. His clothes were dirty with dirt. He had a scratch in his face and eyes. The eyes looked like someone else's, dilated, wild. Where have you been? I asked, grabbing him by the shoulders. We went crazy with worry. Around there, he replied, looking away. I need to take a shower. The next day, I found a lighter and a pack of cigarettes in his pants pocket when I went to do laundry. I cried all day, hidden away. What was happening to that boy I loved so much? Where had I gone wrong? Why was he distancing himself from us like that? We are going through a difficult phase. Jose thought we needed to be tougher, impose punishments, take away privileges. I was still trying to talk, to understand what was going on in his head. I even took him to a psychologist at the health center, but he didn't say a word in the 3 sessions I managed to get him to go to. Your son has a lot of anger bottled up, Mrs. Gertrudes, the doctor told me after the last appointment. Children who have been abandoned, like him, tend to have attachment and trust issues. He may be testing you to see if you will also abandon him, like his biological mother did. That made sense. I decided I was going to be more patient, show him that no matter what he did, we were his family now and always. Jose didn't really agree with this approach, but he ended up giving in. You've always been better with boys, he said in that way of his that doesn't like to admit he doesn't know what to do. It was around this time that I started to notice changes in Rodrigo's body. He was already 13 years old, entering adolescence. His voice deepened, pimples appeared on his face, his arms and legs grew so fast that his clothes became too small in the blink of an eye. Along with these changes came a sudden interest in looking good. He, who never cared about what he wore, now wanted designer clothes, expensive sneakers that we could barely afford. Do you want to impress a girl? N. Jose joked one day when he appeared in the kitchen with his hair all gelled up. His face turned red as a tomato, but he didn't answer anything. It was also around this time that I noticed the magazines. I had found magazines with naked women under his mattress when I went to change the sheets, the really indecent ones. At first I was shocked, but then I thought maybe it was normal for a boy that age. Still, it made me uncomfortable. These weren't the usual magazines that teenagers used to have. Those were more extreme, if you know what I mean. I showed it to Jose, who shrugged. Leave the boy alone, gig. Every boy that age is curious. Better this than doing something wrong out there. But that wasn't all. I began to notice that Rodrigo was looking at me in a way that made me uncomfortable. At first, I thought it was all in my head. I was almost 50 years old at the time, my hair was starting to turn gray, and I had the body of a mother who had already given birth to 2 children. There was no way there was something strange in his eyes. It must have just been my concern, a silly old woman's imagination. Until the day I entered the bathroom without knocking, the door wasn't even completely closed, and I found him with a photo of me in his hand, an old photo from when I was younger, which was in a picture frame in the living room. He was so scared that he dropped the photo on the floor. The glass in the picture frame broke. "What are you doing, Rodrigo?" I asked, confused. "Nothing, I just thought the picture was pretty," he replied, running off and pushing me in the process. I stood there, feeling a chill down my spine that I couldn't explain. That wasn't normal. There was something wrong going on, but I couldn't admit even to myself what it could be. When Rodrigo turned 14, things got even worse. He was practically never at home anymore. I left early, said I was going to school, but I rarely actually went. He would come back late, sometimes smelling of cigarettes, sometimes with a strange, lost look in his eyes. Jose and I fought almost every night because of this. My husband wanted stricter rules. I even wanted to send him back to the orphanage. I despaired just thinking about it. He is our son now, Jose. We don't return a child as if he were a purchase that went wrong, but we can't see that the boy is getting lost, that he doesn't respect us, doesn't respect the rules of the house. What else do you want to happen to make you realize that the situation is out of control? Deep down, I think I knew he was right, but my mother's heart didn't want to accept it. I had promised that boy that I would never abandon him, that he was my son forever. How could I go back? It was then that the money disappearances began. First it was little, our $50 from Jose's wallet that he thought he had spent and forgotten about. Then $100 from my fare envelope. When my sister-in-law's retirement money that I saved for her every month disappeared from her dresser drawer, there was no denying it anymore. I confronted Rodrigo one afternoon when he arrived home. It was already 1994. He was 15 years old. And that skinny, scared boy had turned into a tall, strong young man, with a look that alternated between empty and provocative. "Did you take Aunt Clara's money?" I asked directly, without beating around the bush. "What money?" he replied, throwing his backpack on the couch and going straight to the fridge. "You know very well what money. Our $400 that was in my drawer, Aunt Clara's retirement money that I saved for her." He turned to me with a can of soda in his hand, and for the first time I saw a smile that scared me, a cold, mocking smile. "What if I caught it? What are you going to do?" I was speechless for a few seconds. That wasn't my Rodrigo. He was not the boy I had raised with so much love over the past 6 years. It was a stranger in front of me, using my son's body. "Why are you doing this, son? If you needed money, all you had to do was ask. We don't have much, but we always find a way." "I'm not your son," he interrupted in a voice so cold it sounded like an adult. "I've never been. You're the one who made up this whole story in your head." Those words were like a stab in the chest. I felt my legs weaken. I had to lean on the table to keep from falling. The tears came without me being able to control them. "Don't talk like that, Rodrigo. I love you like a son." "Yes, From day one. Love, he laughed. That strange laugh that didn't seem like his. Love doesn't exist, mommy. People just want to use each other. Just like you and Jose used me to pretend to be the good Samaritans, the saviors of the orphan boy. He walked past me and into the bedroom, leaving me there devastated by those words. What had happened to him? What had I done wrong? Where was that sweet boy who, despite all the problems, had moments of affection, of gratitude? That day I cried like I had never cried before. Jose found me like this when he got home from work, and just by looking at me, he knew something serious had happened. After I told him everything, my husband was silent for a long time, smoking one cigarette after another on the balcony. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired. He needs professional help, Gig. The kind of help we can't give. Perhaps it would be better to look for a specialized institution. No. I screamed desperately. We will not abandon him. He's just confused, lost. It's adolescence. It will pass. Jose shook his head with that expression of someone who knew more than he was saying. My husband has always been a man of few words, but of great observation. There's something wrong with him, Gertrude. Something other than being a teenager, other than being abandoned. There's something broken inside that boy. Something that maybe not all our love can fix. That night I couldn't sleep. I thought about everything that had happened in the last few years, the little signs I had ignored, the changes in behavior, the strange looks, the ever-increasing lies. Was Jose right? Was there something about Rodrigo that went beyond what we could understand or help? What I didn't know is that in just a few weeks I would have the answer in the worst possible way. An answer that would come on a night that would change everything, that would break our family in a way that would never be mended. You know, my daughter, there is an old saying that says that we only truly know a person when we share the same roof. And that's what happened to Rodrigo. The more time he spent at our house, the more I felt like there was a stranger living with us, not my son. In the winter of 1994, things started to get even stranger. Rodrigo was already 15 years old, with a man's body and a deep voice. But the head looked like someone I didn't know. There were days when he would come home and he was that loving boy I met at the orphanage. He asked me for my blessing, helped Jose fix something in the yard, did his schoolwork. At those times, my heart was filled with hope. I thought everything would get better, that it was just a difficult phase, but there were other days. My God, how can I explain it? It was like he was another person. He would arrive with red eyes, a different walk, a closed face, and would lock himself in the room for hours. If Jose or I tried to talk, he would explode in anger, slam doors, break things. He once threw a plate of food at the wall just because I asked him to turn down the music. "What's happening to you, son?" I asked, crying as I cleaned up the broken glass and scattered food. "Nothing you would understand." He always responded with that empty look that gave me chills. It was around this time that I began to notice the marks on his arms. At first, I thought it was a street fight. God knows he was always getting into trouble in the neighborhood. But one day, when I entered the room without knocking to leave clean clothes, I saw him injecting something into his arm. I stood frozen in the doorway. The stack of t-shirts fell from my hands. He turned to me, his eyes wide with fright, then with anger. "Get out of here," he shouted, jumping out of bed. I ran to my room, locked the door, and called Jose at work. My husband dropped everything and came home that very moment. When he arrived, Rodrigo had already left with his backpack. We sat in the kitchen not knowing what to do. "We have to admit him, Jed," Jose said, running his hand over his tired face. "This is going too far. The boy is using drugs inside our house." I still tried to defend myself, to say that maybe it was just flu medicine, a vitamin shot, something other than what I knew it was. But deep down I had already understood. My adopted son, the boy I had promised to love and protect, had become an addict. Rodrigo only returned 2 days later. He looked like a skinny zombie, dark circles under his eyes, shivering from the cold, even though it was a warm summer night. Jose took him by the arms and made him sit at the kitchen table. For the first time, she saw her husband crying as he spoke, "Look what you're doing to yourself, son. Look what you're doing to your mother. She doesn't sleep, doesn't eat, stays at the window waiting for you to come back." For a moment, it seemed like something changed in Rodrigo's gaze. A shadow of guilt, maybe even shame. But it passed quickly. "Do you understand?" he murmured. "No one understands, so explain it to us so we can understand," I begged, holding his hands between mine. They were cold as ice, his fingers bruised, his nails dirty. "What's happening to you? Since when did this start? Why?" He was silent for a while, looking at the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper. "Do you think you know who I am, but you don't? No one does. So tell us." Jose insisted. "We're your family. We want to help." Rodrigo looked up and what I saw there scared me. A mix of anger and something that seemed like pleasure in seeing us suffer. "Family." He laughed in that cold way he had acquired. "This is not it's a family, it's just a convenient arrangement. You wanted a son to replace the ones who left and I needed a roof over my head." Those words were like knives. I knew it wasn't true, that we loved Rodrigo as a real son, but it hurt to hear that. "Isn't it true?" Jose answered with a firmer voice. "You're our son. Yes, that's why we're going to get help for you. Tomorrow I'm going to take you to a place that treats addicts." "I'm not going anywhere," Rodrigo yelled, getting up from the table with such force that he knocked over the chair. "You don't control me. Aren't you my real parents?" And he left, slamming the front door so hard that the picture on the wall fell. Jose ran after him, but he had already disappeared into the darkness. That night, we decided that when he came back we would commit him, even against his will. We had no choice, but he didn't come back the next day, or the day after. A whole week went by and Rodrigo was nowhere to be found. We looked everywhere, hospitals, the police station, the houses of the few friends we had. We knew him. No one had heard from him. Even some boys who lived on the street below the river bridge said they had seen him there, but he had been missing for days. It was one of the worst moments of my life. Guilt ate away at me inside. Where had I gone wrong? What could I have done differently? Why hadn't I seen the signs before? Every night that passed without any news was a torment, imagining my son on the street, cold, hungry, using those drugs that were destroying him inside. "It's not your fault, J.E." Jose tried to comfort me, but I saw the same suffering in his eyes. We did the best we could. Almost 2 weeks later, at dinner time, we heard a knock on the door. When Jose opened it, there was Rodrigo. But he wasn't the same guy who had left. He seemed to have aged years in those 2 weeks, even thinner, with a nasty cut on his eyebrow, his clothes dirty and torn. But the worst part was his glassy, lost eyes. "Son!" I shouted, running to hug him. He could barely stand. "What did they do to you, you?" He didn't answer, he just fell into my arms. Heavy as lead. Jose helped carry him inside. We laid him down on the couch. He was burning with fever, shaking. I wanted to call an ambulance, but Jose thought it best not to. If they find out he's using drugs, they'll call the police. It could make things worse. "We'll take care of him right here." I spent the whole night by Rodrigo's side, changing the cold compresses on his forehead, making him drink water, holding it in while he vomited everything he tried to swallow. In the early morning, At the height of his fever, he began to rave. He called for his real mother. He screamed for someone to stop hitting him, he cried like a small child. It was there, listening to those ravings, that I began to put the pieces together, the things we didn't know about his past, the traumas buried deep inside that no amount of love could heal alone. He murmured names he'd never mentioned while awake, talked about things he'd seen, that he'd suffered. My mother's heart ached with each revelation. How much pain such a young boy had already carried. In the morning, the fever subsided a little. He woke up, looked around in confusion, and then saw me sitting in the chair next to him. "Mom!" He called in a voice that sounded like that 9-year-old boy who had come home with a small backpack. "Are you there?" "I'm here, son," I replied, holding his hand. "I won't leave your side." For a moment, I saw a tear run down his face. For the first time in a long time, he really looked like the Rodrigo I knew, not that stranger who had taken over his body. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know, son, I know, but now we're going to help you. It's going to be okay." How wrong I was, my daughter, things would never be okay again, because what I didn't know was that that moment of lucidity, of repentance, was just a pause before the storm that was coming, a storm that would change our lives forever. During the days that followed, we took care of Rodrigo at home. The withdrawal was horrible to watch. He was sweating cold, shaking, vomiting, and even having convulsions. Jose wanted to take him to the hospital, but I was afraid they would put him in a place worse than the one we were already going through, or that they would send him back to some government institution. So, we took care of him right there, Jose and I, taking turns so as not to leave him alone for a minute. Little by little, he got better. The color returned to his face, his hunger appeared, the tremors began to diminish, and with this physical improvement, there was also a change in his behavior. He seemed like the Rodrigo of before, polite, even affectionate. He apologized for what he had done, thanked them for taking care of him, promised that he would change, that he would never use drugs or steal from us. And we, fools that we were, believed it. Jose even took a week off work to keep an eye on him, to make sure he didn't go out alone, that he didn't go back down the same path, but then he had to go back. Life doesn't stop just because we have problems, right, my dear? The bills kept coming, food had to be bought, rent paid. In the first weeks of October, everything seemed to be getting back on track. Rodrigo had gone back to school, came home on time, did his homework, even started helping out around the house, mowed the neighbor's lawn to earn some change, washed dishes without having to be asked. We were even planning to enroll him in a technical course the following year, to give the boy a profession. One night, the three of us were having dinner together, like we hadn't done in a long time. When Rodrigo looked at me with those big eyes, now free of drugs, and said something I'll never forget. "Mom, you always wanted to know why I started using drugs." Jose and I suddenly got tense. It was a subject we had been avoiding, afraid of bringing back bad memories, of awakening that other Rodrigo who scared us so much. "Only if you want to talk, son," I replied cautiously. "Yes, I do. I think you deserve to know." He took a deep breath. "It was because of my real mother, not the one who died of an overdose when I was little. That's a lie they made up at the orphanage. My mother abandoned me when I was 4 years old. Left it at the door of a church with a note. I never knew why. My heart sank when I heard that after so many years and I had never been able to get him to talk about the past. Then I went from family to family, from orphanage to orphanage. One of them had an employee." He stopped, swallowed hard. "He did things to the children, bad things." Jose put down his fork, his face turning red with anger. I felt nausea rising in my throat. "That's why when you adopted me, I couldn't trust. I couldn't believe that someone would actually want to be with me, take care of me without wanting anything in return. He wiped a tear away with the back of his hand. Then at school, I met some older boys. They gave me these things to use. They said it would make the pain go away. And for a while it actually worked. When I was high, I didn't remember anything, I didn't feel anything. I got up from the table, went around and hugged my son with all the strength I had. Jose also came and put his hand on his shoulder. For the first time, it felt like we had broken through a barrier, gotten to the real Roger, that hurt boy who desperately needed love but didn't know how to receive it. It's going to be okay now, son. I promised, kissing the top of his head. We will help you get through this together as a family. That night, I lay next to Jose with my heart full of hope. We finally understood what was happening to our son. We could finally really help. I think things will get better now. I told my husband as I turned off the light. He opened his heart to us. Joseph was silent for a while, then sighed. I hope so, Jay, but I don't know. There's something in his eyes that still worries me. It's trauma, Jose. The boy went through things we can't even imagine. It will take time, but he will get better. You'll see. I rested my head on my husband's chest and fell asleep, feeling a peace I hadn't felt in years. Little did I know that it would be the last peaceful night we would have in that house, because less than a week later, something never before happened. Not even in my worst nightmares did I imagine it could happen under my own roof. It was the end of October 1994, a Thursday that started like so many others. The day had been hot, in that stuffy way that makes us in Cachoeira do Sul know that a storm is coming. Rodrigo had gone to school in the morning, came back on time, and even had dinner with us, rice, beans and a chicken stew that I had made. He was silent, but that was nothing new. Ever since our conversation about his past, he had been like this sometimes, lost in his own thoughts. Jose commented during dinner that the next day he would have to leave early for work. There was a large load arriving at the cooperative and he, as the person in charge, needed to be there before everyone else. I remember that Rodrigo looked at my husband in a strange way when he said that, but at the time I didn't pay any attention. Before continuing the story, remember to like my story and subscribe to this channel. Thank you all for watching me. After dinner, Rodrigo said he was going to his room to study for a test. Jose stayed in the living room watching the news on television. I tidied the kitchen and went to take a shower. It was our normal routine, no different from any other night. Around 10 o'clock, Jose came to the room. He was tired, so he soon fell asleep. I stayed awake for a while, praying the rosary as I did every night, thanking that things finally seemed to be falling into place. I fell asleep to the sound of the rain that had started to fall outside. Heavy rain, with thunder, the kind that makes us huddle under the covers, thankful for having a roof over our heads. I can't say exactly what time it was when I woke up. Maybe 3 to 4 in the morning. The rain had stopped, but the air was still humid, heavy. I opened my eyes with that strange feeling that someone was looking at me. You know that shiver down the back of your neck that you get when something is wrong? At first, I thought it was just my imagination, that I had woken up from some nightmare I couldn't remember, but then I saw a shadow moving around the room. In my fright, I thought it was a thief who had come in through the window. I was going to shout to wake Jose up when the shadow came closer to the bed and I realized, with my heart almost stopping, that it was Rodrigo. He was standing next to my bed, looking at me in a way I will never forget. It wasn't my son's gaze, it was the gaze of a stranger, of someone I didn't know, cold, empty, but at the same time too intense. Roger. I called softly, confused. What's up, son? Are you feeling sick? He didn't answer, he just kept looking at me in that way that chilled my soul. It was then that I realized he was shirtless, just wearing shorts. And as my eyes became more accustomed to the darkness, I noticed something that made me stop breathing. He was excited, in a way no mother should see her child. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking with fear. I tried to sit up in bed, move away, but with a quick movement, he put his hand over my mouth, stopping me from screaming. He whispered, coming closer. "Don't wake up, Jose. I don't want to hurt you." The terror I felt at that moment cannot be explained in words. He was my son, that boy I had raised with so much love that I had promised to protect. And there he was like a wild beast about to attack his own mother. I tried to struggle, to push him away, but Rodrigo was strong, much stronger than I ever imagined. In one movement, he climbed onto the bed above me. I felt his weight immobilizing me, his hand pressing so tightly over my mouth that I could barely breathe. "I've always wanted to do this." He whispered words in my ear that made me want to vomit. "From the first day I came to this house, you didn't notice how I looked, how I walked around the house." Tears streamed down my face as I desperately tried to wake Jose, who was sleeping on the other side of the bed. But my husband was always a heavy sleeper, he never woke up easily. In my terrified eyes, I begged Rodrigo to stop so I could go back to being the boy I knew, the boy I loved. For a moment, it seemed like he hesitated. I saw a flash of confusion pass through his eyes, as if for a second he had come to his senses. But soon that empty look returned and he began to pull the sheet covering me. It was at that moment that Jose finally woke up. Maybe because of the movement in the bed, maybe because of the sixth sense that only a father has. I don't know. All I know is that suddenly I heard my husband's voice, confused at first, then filled with a horror I had never heard before. "What the hell is this?" Jose shouted, sitting up in bed with a start. Rodrigo turned his head in fright, but he didn't get off of me. It was as if something had broken inside him for good, as if that last thread of humanity that was still left had snapped. "Get off her!" Jose yelled, jumping on top of Rodrigo with a strength I didn't know my 55-year-old husband still had. The two fell to the floor with a dull thud, knocking over the lamp on the bedside table. I heard screams, sounds of fighting, things breaking. I turned on the bedroom light with shaking hands and saw a scene I will never forget. Jose and Rodrigo rolling on the floor, my husband trying to immobilize our son, who was struggling like a wild animal. "Call the police!" Jose shouted at me as he tried to hold Rodrigo's arms. "Go, Gertrudes, call the police." But I was paralyzed, in shock, unable to believe what was happening. How had we gotten to this point? How the boy I had promised to love and protect had turned into this monster? With a sudden movement, Rodrigo managed to free himself from Jose. I saw my son grab something from the floor, the broken lamp, and before he could shout a warning, he hit my husband in the head with all his strength. Jose fell backwards, a trickle of blood running down his forehead. He wasn't unconscious, but he was too stunned to react. Rodrigo stood up, looking from his father to me with a smile that didn't seem human. "See what you did," he said, pointing at Jose, bleeding on the floor. "If I had kept quiet, none of this would have had to happen." That voice was not the voice of my Rodrigo, it was the voice of someone or something that had taken over him. At that moment, an instinct I didn't even know I had awakened within me. I jumped out of bed, ran past Rodrigo and managed to get out into the hallway. "Help!" I screamed, running towards the front door. "Can someone help me?" Rodrigo came after me, but he tripped over the furniture in the dark room. I managed to get to the door, unlock it with trembling fingers and go out into the street still in my nightgown. The night was cold and damp after the rain, but I barely felt the cold. I just ran. I ran like I had never run before, screaming for help. It was Mr. Armando, our neighbor across the street, who left first. Then Mrs. Lords from the house next door. Soon there were half a dozen neighbors on the street, confused, scared, with the woman in her nightgown screaming in despair in the middle of the night. "My son, my husband, please, someone call the police." Mr. Armando and his oldest son, a strong young man who worked as a security guard, ran to our house. Rodrigo had disappeared, jumping over the back wall, we discovered later. Jose was sitting on the sofa in the living room, holding a cloth against the cut on his forehead, pale and shaking. The police arrived almost half an hour later. Back then, in a small town, things took longer. Delegate Osvaldo had known our family for years. I couldn't believe it when we told him what had happened. "Are you sure, Mrs. Gertrudes?" "Rodrigo. That quiet boy. How do you explain to someone that your own child, who you raised for years, had tried, but couldn't even say the word? How can you admit that that boy who everyone saw as shy and polite, hid a side that not even we, who lived under the same roof, knew completely?" They searched the entire city, but Rodrigo had disappeared. Jose was taken to the small hospital in Cachoeira do Sul, where they put some stitches in his forehead and prescribed tranquilizers for both of us. When we got home in the morning, it looked like a hurricane had passed through. Broken furniture, glass on the floor, blood stains on the bedroom carpet. But the worst part wasn't the physical mess, it was the feeling that something had been irreparably destroyed. Our family, our trust, our sense of security. For days I couldn't sleep properly. Every noise in the night made me jump out of bed, thinking it was him coming back. Jose, my husband, always so strong, was also destroyed. It wasn't just the physical wound, it was the wound in the soul, the feeling that we had failed as parents, that we had failed to see the evil growing under our own roof. 3 days passed without any news, until one afternoon the phone rang. It was Delegate Osvaldo. "Mrs. Gertrudes, we found Rodrigo." My heart raced. For a moment, that maternal instinct that never completely dies took over me, and all I could think about was whether he was okay, whether he was hurt. "Where? How is he?" There was silence on the other end of the line, and then the deep voice of the deputy. "He's alive, but he's not well, Mrs. Gertrudes. We found him in an abandoned house near the train station. I had used a lot of drugs. It looks like he tried to kill himself." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Despite everything that had happened, he was my son. The boy I had promised never to abandon. "We took him to the hospital first," the police officer continued. "Afterwards he will be transferred to the psychiatric hospital in Santa Maria. Doctors believe he has serious mental problems in addition to drug addiction." I don't really know how I ended that call, nor how I managed to tell Jose what had happened. I know that that same afternoon we went to visit Rodrigo in the hospital. He was handcuffed to the bed, sedated, his eyes half closed. He didn't seem to recognize us, or maybe he was pretending. I remember holding his hand, cold and lifeless, and crying until I had no more tears. "Why, son?" I asked, even though I knew I wouldn't get an answer. "Why?" The next day he was transferred to the psychiatric hospital. We were allowed to visit him a week later. It was a sad place, with peeling white walls, full of lost-looking people wandering the halls. A doctor received us before the visit. A young man with dark circles under his eyes and thinning hair. "Your son has a complex condition," he explained, flipping through a folder. "Schizophrenia, antisocial personality disorder, and chemical dependency. He probably already had these problems when you adopted him, but they gradually became apparent, aggravated by drug use." I remained silent, absorbing those difficult words that tried to explain how our son had become a stranger before our eyes. "Does he remember what he did?" Jose asked in a hoarse voice. The doctor adjusted his glasses. "Yes and no. He alternates between moments of lucidity in which he seems remorseful and others in which he denies everything or says that you deserved it. It is characteristic of his condition, he is unable to maintain a coherent line of thought. When we finally entered the room where Rodrigo was, I barely recognized my son. He had lost even more weight, his face was sunken, there were deep circles under his eyes, and his hair was cut very short. He was sitting on the bed, looking out the barred window. "Son," I called cautiously. He turned his head slowly. For a moment, I thought I saw a glimpse of the old Roger in those eyes. The scared boy, who had arrived at our house years before, but soon that empty, distant look took over again. "What do you want here?" he asked. The voice was monotonous, emotionless. "We came to see how you are," Jose replied, keeping his distance. I realized that my husband could no longer look at Rodrigo in the same way. Something had been broken forever between them. Rodrigo gave a dry, humorless laugh. "It's too late to worry now, don't you think?" "It's never too late, son," I said, still trying to reach some part of him that might be intact. "You are sick, but you will get better. And when it gets better? And when I get better, what?" He interrupted, his voice growing more agitated. "I'm going back home. Will we be a happy family again?" After what I did, I had no answer for that, because deep down I knew it was true. Nothing would be the same again. Even if one day he got better, even if one day we could forgive, the scars would be permanent. That was the last time we saw Rodrigo. A few weeks later, he was transferred to a custodial hospital in Porto Alegre, a place for criminals with mental illness. The judge ordered him to remain there indefinitely, until he was cured. If that ever happened, Jose and I would return home to a life that seemed empty, meaningless. Our home, which had once been a place full of hope, now seemed haunted by memories. Every corner, every piece of furniture, every photograph on the wall told a different story, but they all ended in the same painful way. We tried to move on, but we were never the same again. Jose, my strong husband, who never showed weakness, began drinking more than usual. At night I would hear him walking around the house, checking the locks, looking under the beds, as if he still expected to find some hidden monster. I myself started having terrible nightmares. I woke up screaming, in a cold sweat, and always the same question tormented me. How did we not see it? How did we not realize that there was something so wrong happening right under our noses? Were we so desperate to save that boy that we refused to see the signs? Today, sitting on this old porch, looking at the Jacqui River, which continues to flow as if nothing had happened, I can look back with a little more clarity. It's been more than 30 years since that terrible night. Time does not heal all wounds, as they say, but it teaches us to live with the scars. Jose, my husband, died in 2003 of a heart attack. It was never the same after that night. He carried a guilt that wasn't his until the last day. "I should have known, Gag," he would sometimes say, usually after a few shots. "I should have protected you." Our biological children, Paolo and Margarita, tried to support us as best they could, but they lived far away. They had their own families, their own problems. And to be honest, I think they also felt a little guilty for not being there when it all happened, for having left their elderly parents alone with that troubled boy. As for Rodrigo, we hear from him every now and then through social services. I know he is still hospitalized after so many years. He has had better times, worse times. In 2008, he was even evaluated for possible release, but he had a violent relapse and returned to intensive care. The last letter I received about him, about 2 years ago, said that he was stable, medicated, participating in therapy activities, but he will never be truly free again, not from the institution, nor from the demons he carries inside himself. I didn't visit him anymore, not when Jose died, not on important dates. Some may judge me for this, thinking that I abandoned my son when he needed me most, but the truth is that I couldn't look at him. Without reliving that night, without feeling that terror again. And yet, my daughter, even after everything, I still feel a pain in my chest when I think of him. Not about Rodrigo from that terrible night, but about the 9-year-old boy with the big, frightened eyes, with the small backpack containing everything he had in the world, the boy who, for a brief period, was really my son. Over time, I have learned a few things that I want to share with you. Maybe it will help some mother, some father who is going through a similar situation. May God protect us, may it not be as extreme as ours. First, I understood that love does not cure everything. We grow up hearing that a mother's love can move mountains, overcome any obstacle. Isn't that true? Some wounds are too deep. Some problems need professional help, medicine, serious treatment. Love is important, fundamental even, but it is not enough. Second, I have learned to recognize the signs. Today, when I see a young person with behavior similar to the one Rodrigo began to show, I feel a shiver down my spine. The blank looks, the sudden mood swings, the cruelty to animals or weaker people, bigger and bigger lies, growing isolation, are warnings that life gives us and that we need to take seriously. Third, I understood that we should never ignore our instincts. That little voice inside us that tells us that something is wrong doesn't speak for nothing. How many times did I feel that there was something strange in Rodrigo's gaze, in the way he followed me around the house, how he took my things without knowing it, but I ignored it because I didn't want to believe it, because it was easier to pretend that everything was fine. Fourth, I learned that some people come into the world with something broken inside them. It's not their parents' fault, it's not their environment's fault, it's something in their own constitution. Of course, abandonment, abuse, and trauma make everything worse, as in Rodrigo's case. But some souls are born with a darkness that not all the love in the world can illuminate. Finally, I understood that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or trusting again. I forgave Rodrigo in the sense of not harboring hatred for him, of understanding that he was sick, that he didn't have complete control over his actions. But that doesn't mean that I could trust him again or put other people in trouble. Risk because of a feeling of guilt or maternal duty. In the years that followed that night, I met other families who went through similar situations, not exactly the same, but with children who had serious mental problems, who became violent, dangerous. It is more common than we imagine, but no one talks about it. It seems like there is a conspiracy of silence, as if admitting that your child could be a threat was the biggest failure a mother can have. We even formed a support group here in Cachoeira do Sul. We meet once a month at church. We share our stories, our pain, our small victories. It helps to know that we are not alone, that other mothers also carry this silent burden. Today, at 76 years old, I look back and see a life marked by this tragedy, but not defined by it. I had moments of joy too. Paulo's wedding, the birth of my grandchildren, Margarita's visits when she can come from Porto Alegre. Life goes on even when it seems impossible to move forward. If you are going through something similar, if you have a child with mental problems who is becoming a threat, don't be ashamed to seek help. Don't wait until it's too late, like I did. Don't let love follow you into real dangers. And remember, you're not a bad mother for recognizing that your child needs more help than you can give. Oh, my daughter, if you like this story, even though it's so sad, be sure to subscribe to the Memorias de Vovô channel. Just click the button right below the video. And if you want to talk to other people who follow our stories, join the WhatsApp group in the description. There, the team of this channel tells more stories and makes friends with people from all over Brazil. And remember, my dear, wisdom doesn't come from books, it comes from the scars that life leaves. And we, old as we are, have many scars and many stories still to tell. Some good, some bad, but all true, all part of this great journey that is life. Sometimes we spend years crossing paths with the same people and never imagine what they went through, what they did to survive. Each wrinkled face like mine hides 1,000 stories, 1,000 battles silent. And if my story can help someone not to go through what I went through, it will have been worth sharing this old pain. Thank you for listening to me, for letting me vent. May God protect you and your family and keep evil far away from your home.